minus 4 and counting.
Good morning and welcome to AirOccupy. This is the radio show that speaks truth to power and occupies your mind for the next hour. I'm Liz and I'm here with my co-hosts, Jerry and Shannon. And today we're having a show about referendums and ballot initiatives all across the United States.
Today's show was to feature Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president, but due to some scheduling difficulties, she's not going to be with us today, unfortunately. And we're going to look to get her back on a show before the election. We've actually confirmed a couple of the future shows. One has to do next week.
Yes, next week we're going to have the maker and director of Broadcast Blues, Sue Wilson. And we're also going to have Broadcast Blues is a 75-minute documentary film that essentially shows everything that Sue Wilson has learned over the past 25 years as a professional broadcaster. She's been in radio and TV, and she's trying to raise public awareness about our media. So that's going to be next week. Her name's Sue Wilson, and Broadcast Blues is the movie that we're going to be talking about, as well as Taking Back Our Media.
Are we going to screen that?
Yes.
It looks like it'll be Friday night, 7 o'clock, at the Unitarian Universalist Society on 56 North Halifax in Ormond Beach. That is behind the post office. That's across from Billy's Tap Room if you go from 40 to Halifax.
So if you're local and you want to watch this movie before our show next week, Broadcast Blues, 7 p.m. at the UU in Ormond Beach, we will put it on our website. We'll have some snacks and stuff and good old time watching the media be the media.
And then the following week, we're going to have a show that focuses on sustainable gardening. We're going to have an in-house horticulturist with us and talk about fall gardening in Florida.
Yep. Then a few weeks in the future, we're going to have Occupy the Hood, to talk about Hood Week. And then very exciting news.
Very exciting.
In November, we're going to be talking with Noam Chomsky. So we're working out the schedule. He says he can do it on a Tuesday, so stay tuned to that, and we will be sure to tell everybody, what's going on and when it's going to be, so you guys can tell us questions to ask him. And for any of our shows that we have, if you have questions about the topic, about the guest, and you say, hey, could you ask this question? Please email it to us.
Twitter me this.
Twitter. It's at AirOccupy. You can also. Today, you can call the studio. Sometimes we're a little bit busy with the guests, so we don't get to take calls. But today, it's 386-523-1380. And
so as promised, today we're going to talk about ballot initiatives. And these are, I'm going to give a little explanation of what those are. They're sometimes referred to as referendum, and they're usually put on statewide ballots for votes by the collection of a certain number of signatures. Depending on what your state requires, or in some states, including Florida, there can be legislatively initiated ballot initiatives, and we have a number of those in Florida this year.
In fact, they're all legislatively initiated in Florida this year.
Yep.
Constitutional amendments. In that case, you can both amend your constitution through the referenda process in a lot of places, and you can also have state laws that are passed by initiative.
Right, and just to get a little technical, if anybody wants to know, so an initiative is when citizens have the chance to adopt laws or amend the Constitution. And referendum is when citizens have the ability to say yay or nay to reject or accept laws or amendments that are proposed by the state legislature. So, I mean, that's just a little technicality, but usually people use referendum and initiatives interchangeably, but they don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Today we're going to, I think, proceed in talking about this through some categories. There are multiple states that have initiatives that replicate each other. There are certain health care initiatives, there's certain marriage amendment, marijuana laws, tax laws. So we thought we'd break it down by pairing up some issues, and I think we thought today we would start out by talking about marriage and laws where people are going to have a direct voice in marriage. I mean, for me, the referendum process off the top is the one that the part of our democracy that most closely resembles what we all did in the General Assemblies at Occupy, wherein each person has a voice.
Right. And Thomas Jefferson he really wanted the referendum and initiative process at a national level, because he said that this was a check and a balance that the citizens had over the government. So when the government wasn't responsive to the citizens' needs, the citizens could come and petition the government directly to put something on the ballot so that everyone could have a say. And
I was reading that there are nearly 200 initiatives on ballots for the general election on November 6th across the country. But I think that number it's actually a lot higher than that. I think that's limited to initiatives as opposed to referenda and constitutionally or legislatively initiated mandates.
Well, and it doesn't include any of the local, because counties and cities and towns also can put their own initiatives on their own ballots.
I kind of like to return to that point you just made about Thomas Jefferson wanting the same opportunity at the national level. Really, we could use that about now.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in a sense, the amendment process that we have for the Constitution gets close to that.
But it hasn't been
Still
implemented.
depends on your legislature to vote.
Well, I mean, there's always the Article 5 Constitutional Convention, which has not been invoked in a while. And we do want to get into that in a future show about Citizens United, because I know that that's been brought up. But that was Madison actually thought of the Constitutional Convention as a way to provide that check and balance that Jefferson wanted by national referendum. I don't necessarily think it works that way now, since we're such a large nation.
We actually have that option. Florida, one of the options that citizens have is to have an initiative for the state of Florida to call for a constitutional convention. It requires more votes than the usual citizens initiative, but it is one of the options.
In a lot of states, I know Alaska's one, a lot of the western states have automatically, every 10 years, it comes up on their ballot, whether to call a constitutional convention or not. I think New Hampshire actually has that as an amendment in their constitution. So every 10 years or so, they have to vote on whether to call a constitutional convention.
Florida's ballot measures are if you want to place a constitutional amendment on the ballot, you need 8% of the total number of votes cast in the last presidential election. To call a broader constitutional convention in Florida, you need to collect 15% of the total votes cast in the last presidential election. So it's a significant number of signatures that you would require, which I think is a good check. You don't want to have a constitutional convention every 5 minutes.
Well, we've named the pros on why these initiatives are good, but you know what? The initiative and referendum process has been hijacked in a lot of cases by corporate interests. So, we're talking about this like it's a great process, but some of these amendments, I can think of the ones which we'll be talking about in a little bit about health care, which say that the states don't have to abide by the federal health care law, were sponsored by ALEC, which is the legislative committee that's kind of the corporate legislative committee that's taken over a lot of legislation.
It hits on another big concern, a big Occupy concern, a big concern to voters, and that is the inordinate amount of power that we've ceded to the corporations. I mean, the best recent example is Prop 8, the marriage amendment in California, which was opposed by lots of outside money. I think I saw estimates that the Mormon Church and its affiliates spent some $20 million opposing that. So it really, although you in the end you're getting votes from citizens on measures directly, the measures are often influenced by millions of dollars of outside advertising money.
There's actually bipartisan rejection of that amount of money going to influence legislation. I happened in my reading, I came across a number of articles. Some were from conservative sources and some were from more liberal sources. And all of them decried outside money, large sums coming in to influence local and state elections, to do things like ballot initiatives, because it's just not the democratic process as it was intended. And
We talked last week about Proposition 37 in California with the labeling of GMOs and the money that has gone into funding that that proposition is unreal, mostly on the corporate side. Corporations such as Kellogg and General
Monsanto.
Mills. Well, Monsanto is the number one giver. Have given millions and millions of dollars to defeat Proposition 37.
I don't know if we want to get into this now, but there's another avenue that corporations and specifically the financial industry in Florida, and I wouldn't be surprised to find elsewhere, are trying to influence legislation. And that is, there's an initiative backed by the financial services industry in Florida to unseat judges, and maybe we'll be talking about that a little more later. But we tend to think of these things as sort of removed and, you know, not that pertinent to our daily lives, but they really are. In Florida, we have one party controls all the branches of government except for the court. And
Got to rein those judges in.
yeah.
Those activist judges.
Well, I think we're going to take a short break, and we're going to listen to a song by Blur, which is Girls and Boys. And when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about marriage equality and some of these other, some of the other trends that are happening in ballot initiatives and referendum today.
Looking for girls who were born
We're back. This is AirOccupy. I'm Liz, and I'm here with Jerry and Shannon. And I have to tell you, that's one of my favorite songs. So I've been waiting for a show to play it. You know, gotta play what you love, isn't it? Don't you? So on marriage equality it's on several different ballots this year. There's one amendment to ban same-sex marriage in Minnesota. There's one referendum to repeal a previously approved ban, which is in Maine. And this gives Maine the opportunity to become the first state to affirmatively vote for marriage equality. So we'll be watching that one pretty closely. And then there's two referendums to repeal laws passed by the legislatures authorizing gay marriage. So that would be in Maryland and in Washington. So basically, there's one affirmative vote on same-sex marriage and 4 to ban it.
And you said the ones to ban it were largely backed by ALEC?
I don't have that information, but I know that...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We could probably guess some of the culprits on those to ban it. And it's, to date... all state laws permitting same-sex marriage have been passed by the legislatures or courts. So, as I said, Maine could be the first one where by popular vote they approved marriage equality.
I think there's also been a move to unseat judges who voted in those states for...
Happened in Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Happened in Iowa. So this struggle's been going on for marriage equality, especially in the ballot initiatives, since about 1993, after the Hawaii Supreme Court ruled that refusal to grant same-sex marriage licenses was sex discrimination under the state constitution. After that ruling, some of the more conservative groups freaked out and started putting bans on marriage equality on ballots. And they called them defensive marriage measures. They were on the ballot in Alaska, California, Nebraska, and Nevada. And all of those in early 2000s, and all of those were approved, saying that marriage was only between one man and one woman, unlike the biblical marriage, but we won't get into that.
There's a song for that.
Yeah.
So how many of the states have had referenda on this? Some 30? Is it? It's a goodly number.
It's
when
a
this
big
issue's
number,
been presented to the public in the past, they have rejected marriage equality.
34.
But as we've seen recently, the polls have changed dramatically
Yes.
on that issue.
Yes.
So most recently when Obama changed his position on it in reference to the North Carolina referendum,
Right. Well,
which was defeated.
voters have approved 34 of 35 measures banning same-sex marriage, and the only place that it failed to pass was in Arizona when they coupled it with same-sex marriage along with civil unions, and the people of the state said, no, we want civil unions, we just don't want same-sex marriage. Now, just an update on Proposition 8, which, if you will remember, in 2008, California passed Proposition 8 by ballot initiative to reinstate a ban on same-sex marriage that had previously been removed by the state court as unconstitutional. As of February 7th, 2012, the Ninth Circuit of Appeals affirmed the U.S. District Court's decision and found Prop 8 to be unconstitutional, meaning that as of February this year, it was unconstitutional to ban marriage in any, marriage by same-sex couples. The panel also affirmed the decision by the trial judge not to recuse himself because he's gay. I don't know if anyone remembers that kerfuffle over
They will stop at nothing.
Yes, they will stop at nothing. They tried to recuse the judge.
But as Liz was saying, that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals panel decision 2-1 affirmed Judge Walker, District Court, California, and we just found out today that at least for now, the Supreme Court has declined to hear that appeal. Yesterday was the first day in which the judges consider what are called petitions for writ of certiorari, which is the appeal route to the Supreme Court. And among the cases that they decided yesterday, the California case was not among them. That just means that they haven't decided yet. It could come up later in the term.
Right, and I don't see how they wouldn't hear the case. I mean, they might not, which would limit the ruling to the Ninth Circuit, which is the western states. If they do not take it up, the Supreme Court doesn't hear it.
So kind of an interesting sports meets public policy and politics when a member, I guess, of the Baltimore Ravens football club came out in favor of gay marriage in Maryland, and he was roundly criticized for that. But a number of NFL players have now come out. We don't, everybody knows that the NFL is probably one of the last bastions for tradition, if I could put it nicely. But now a number of players have come out publicly in support of the marriage amendment that allows all people to marry.
I think we were sold a package of morality and patriotism that, given further thought and actual practice, people really just aren't buying that anymore, and we have much larger issues, and the public is speaking pretty loudly about it.
Yeah. I think once you meet a loving gay couple, it changes your view of everything. I mean, for me, I always thought that anyone should be able to marry whoever they like. But I think for most conservatives, when gay couples came out and said we're together and we are like a married couple, then it really changed some views. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that may be complicating the Supreme Court's consideration of the Proposition 8 case, it's called the Perry case, is that there are other cases pending or potentially pending before the court. There's Defense of Marriage Act, the DOMA case, which the First Circuit had found to be unconstitutional in part in May. And then there's also a number of challenges to the Defense of Marriage Act that are up there. So maybe we'll see all these cases decided together.
Well, that's a good point. I had forgotten about that. Another big trend that's going on in ballot initiatives this year are about marijuana.
Weed.
some interesting loosening of criminal standards.
See, I guess the marijuana initiatives appear now in 6 states on November 6th, and 3 of the states voting this year are voting with regard to allowing medical marijuana. We currently have 17 states that have some form of medical marijuana. 3 more states are going to be voting on that next month: Arkansas, Massachusetts, and Montana. And then there are 3 propositions pending: 1 in Washington, 1 in Colorado, 1 in Oregon, that go further. Washington ballot initiative 1-502 would remove state law prohibitions against producing, processing, and selling marijuana and allow limited possession to those over 21. It is part of a tax regime, comes with a 25% tax on wholesale and retail sales, and that money is going to be used for health care, marijuana education, research, and treatment, and then some portion of that tax money will go into the general fund of Washington State. It's a fairly interesting take on that. In Colorado, Amendment 64 is to decriminalize completely the possession of marijuana in Colorado. I think currently, I'm not sure what the classification is, but
It's medical. They have medical.
But in terms of non-medical use of marijuana, I think there's a de minimis penalty now. I think in 2006 they voted to have it be a fine. I'm not quite sure if it's a misdemeanor, but this new Amendment 64 would completely decriminalize the possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana by persons 21 or older. The amendment does not affect cultivation, transfer, or sale of marijuana, so it's a little less broad than the Washington provision. And I think then the widest measure is that in Oregon. It's called Measure 80. It's an initiated state statute, and it would permit commercial cannabis cultivation and sale to adults. It would permit unlicensed adult personal cultivation and use. It would remove restrictions on growing hemp, and it would create state licensed stores with state sanctioned weed, and they would tax that. Interestingly, one of the provisions is public consumption of weed would be limited to areas where signs permit.
Well, that's just in time, since Amsterdam is shutting down its marijuana trade. It's as of January 1st, 2013, Amsterdam will no longer sell marijuana to non-citizens or
Well,
residents, not non-residents.
I think it's interesting. I think in Oregon there were estimates that the bill or the decriminalization and allowance of the use of marijuana and the cultivation would create $140 million in tax revenues and save $60 million in criminal justice costs just for Oregon.
We actually have a statistic from 2006 when California passed the decriminalization of marijuana possession saved taxpayers $857 million just in 2006 in California.
Wow.
You know, the larger issue with regard to marijuana is the cost, you know, the taxpayer cost of jailing people for nonviolent crimes,
The war on drugs internationally and nationally.
Well, there's also the societal cost of the damage that it does to these individuals' lives.
Right, they're not working and paying taxes if they're in jail.
Right.
The estimates from a recent study, actually the study was from 2007 and it was reaffirmed in 2009, the U.S. cost is $42 billion a year. That's a low cost. That doesn't take into account what we're doing abroad with regard to drug policy. But that's $10 billion in incarceration costs and $30 billion in lost tax revenue, which, you know, that's a pretty significant sum these days.
It is. And when you couple the $40 billion with the cost of all people, felons who cannot vote and rights are taken away, it's a pretty big. I think it's a very big step, and it's a very positive step to decriminalize.
Well, I think, you know, given in Colorado in particular, there's support from all sorts of law enforcement agencies that come out and endorse it because they don't want to waste their time anymore on these nonviolent possession crimes. People who possess marijuana aren't really out on criminal rampages, and it follows up the system, and they're putting people in jail for a completely nonviolent offense that, as in large measure, does not have high cost to society.
Right.
There's really widespread acknowledgement that the war on drugs has been a dismal failure.
Fail.
Yes. Fail.
But you see the same kind of interests at play. I mean, recently California had Proposition 19 to go on kind of an Oregon-type wide regime to control and tax and allow people to grow their own marijuana. And the growers, the current medical marijuana growers, opposed the passage of that bill because they're financially self-interested.
Not to get too far afield, but, you know, once again, we're talking about the unequal and huge disparity in the treatment of, you know, average citizens and treatment of corporate criminals.
Good point.
You know, we've got people who have cost us a whole lot more than that who are walking scot-free with their bonuses intact.
New York City provides the perfect example, you know. 700,000 stop and frisks per year of the denizens of New York, and not one single bank perp walk. I mean, it's just stunning.
It is. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back to talk about what's wrong with Florida, because unfortunately...
Florida.
I know. I love living here, but man, sometimes
Another
it's
day
just
in paradise, people.
It's just a little crazy. So, see you in about a minute.
Greetings. I am the Count. Do you know what? Look, flowers. I will count them. One flower. Two flowers. Three flowers. Four flowers.
Life on this beautiful for green and blue ball me and you call Earth would be so very different if this God sent plants I cultivate on my land never existed. This flower that I hold in my palm is quite exquisite, though most adults are penalized if ever sighted with it. Hemp rope is too strong and is not right for business. The DuPont dynasty said you cannot grow it. If Mother Earth's a criminal, then she must not know it. They say I'm anti-government, but I'm just pro-people. And if you know Mr. Page, you know he's so legal. Anyone that disagrees fundamentally with me's got a mental disorder. And you will know the truth is essential as water. As the airwaves choke on Rupert Murdoch's Cuban cigar smoke, I save up my money for a Sarah Jones record, knowing just how much I'ma love it when I grip it. Like the Judy Garland sprouting in my garden, come and get it. Yo, they persecute the lady like every day, and she's a special. Sometimes it feels like God's away, and it's a devil. They will flood the streets with poisonous powder, though. You know that. But they won't allow a beautiful flower to grow. Now, what is one to you? Right?
Hello.
Hi. That was
An
Flowers.
abrupt ending.
Yeah. That was Flowers by Payday Monsanto. Talking about the beautiful little flowers that will now grow in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, as well as 34 other states. Is that right? 34? Okay, something like that. This is AirOccupy, and we're going to talk a little bit about Florida.
Well, I think we were going to go back to healthcare first.
Okay.
Yeah, we could
can
jump
do
to
that.
healthcare. There's been some controversy in the wake of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. Certain states whose attorneys general fought against the implementation and were denied that move by the Supreme Court have now moved either by ballot initiative or legislation to essentially prevent the implementation of the Affordable Care Act in two ways. And that is, one would say, one approach has been to remove any penalty that might be applicable under the federal law for those that don't purchase insurance. And the second one is an effort to prevent the creation of the exchanges that are necessary under the ACA. So we already have 4 states that have voted, Arizona, Missouri, Ohio, and Oklahoma, have passed laws by referenda to prohibit individuals from being compelled to pay any kind of a penalty for the refusal to comply with the individual mandate. Colorado rejected a referenda on that point. But this year, Alabama, Florida, Montana, and Wyoming are going to vote on that on November 6th. I guess Missouri has already prevented or passed a law prohibiting the creation of the healthcare exchanges. I got news for in both cases. State law that tries to prevent the execution of the federal law is going to be found to be unconstitutional under the Supremacy Clause. So these are largely symbolic votes that people are taking, protest votes, because, in fact, they'll have no force and effect under the law.
And these are initiatives that have been sponsored by ALEC. These are the ALEC ones. Yeah. Oh, it could have been.
It could have been any law.
Could have been any law. But these are the ones that ALEC has funded and put money behind, all these ballot initiatives, which, as Jerry says, I believe they're largely unconstitutional, or they will be found to be unconstitutional because under the Supremacy Clause. We'll just have to see what happens.
And with respect to the question about the creation of exchanges, the authors of the bill were smart enough to perceive that some parts of the country might not be as willing to move into the 21st century as others. And if the states don't show the federal government a plan by January 1st, 2013, that they're going to have an exchange up and running by January 1st, 2014, the law reserves the power to the federal government to come into that state and create its own exchange. So, as I said before, that kind of a vote is largely symbolic, if not ultimately unconstitutional.
Well, and it's kind of funny in these cases where the federal government will come in and create an exchange rather than the state exchange. That really does move closer to the federal government controlling the healthcare process, which is what a lot of the opponents of the Affordable Care Act wanted. So by voting to not create an exchange in their state, they're actually voting to create a federal system.
You're going to get exactly what you didn't want.
So think about that, people.
That really complicates the Florida ballot initiative.
Doesn't it?
It does.
Actually, that leads the Florida ballot initiatives is the healthcare services proposed amendment. I have in front of me the League of Women Voters positions on 12 ballot initiatives. The thing I want to state, just to cut to the chase, the League opposes all of the amendments. All of the amendments were proposed by the Florida legislature. It's worth noting that the process for the legislature to propose amendments is much easier than the process for citizens to propose amendments. There's been a lot of, I remember in past years, the legislature was just, the Florida government was up in arms about citizen proposed initiatives. How dare they propose initiatives? But here we have 12 by the legislature, almost all of which could have been handled through Florida statutes without having to be written into the Florida Constitution. I think that's an abuse of power. The League points out that just 5 of the amendments were to pass, local governments would lose over $1 billion in the first 3 years of implementation. That's a really significant number in this economic climate. The League points out in the first, the healthcare services, which would allow Florida to opt out of federal healthcare reform, that it would, as Jerry and Liz pointed out, conflict with federal law and thus be deemed unconstitutional. The second one is veterans disabled due to combat injury homestead property discount. This amendment expands the homestead exemption to disabled veterans who were not Florida residents when they entered military service. We already have that for people who were Florida residents. They estimate it could cost local governments $15 million. And their reason for opposing the amendment is that the League has a standing position that no tax sources or revenues should be specified, limited, exempted, or prohibited in the Constitution. Again, this is something that could be handled by state statute very easily. The reason to push it through the Constitution is it makes it much harder to get rid of it if it doesn't work.
Right. That's an interesting point.
I think that's a result of going way back in California referendum history to the initiative that changed how property tax, any changes in property taxes would require a supermajority of the legislature to change. And now they've had 25 years of underfunding and real problems because of that constraint.
That actually comes up in another amendment, and in that one, well, I'll get to that one when I get to that one.
The other ones that kind of jumped out at me were the Amendment 5, which gives the legislature greatly increased control over the judiciary. And for me, is really a separation of powers issue. It really threatens the independence of the judiciary by instituting a rule now that the legislature can change the rules of court. And I think to be independent, the court needs to make its own rules.
That's actually, there's a two-pronged attack on the courts through the ballot this year. One is Florida has an unusual system due to actual, corrupt judges and a big scandal that occurred in the early 70s. Governor Askew gave up his right to appoint judges to create a process that had much greater oversight, and it set up a committee of
It's split between ABA, the American Bar Association, or not American, but Florida Bar Association members, and
governor appointees.
Governor appointees, that's right.
So currently a slate of approved lawyers who get vetted by this committee, get a list of names, get sent to the governor, and he gets to choose from that list.
The review process is very extensive, and there's an extensive interview process as well. Great background checks and, trial testing for their response, for constitutionality of their responses.
one of the less objectionable portions of this amendment would give the Senate in Florida a confirmation right, and that would, in a sense, replicate what we have at the federal level. I don't really have strong objections to that. While I think it's a power play by a Senate and a legislature that's dominated by Republicans here, I'm a little less concerned about that kind of participation in the selection of judges.
Well, in this case, we've got widespread history of election and voter fraud in Florida. Mm-hmm. We have all branches of government except for the courts that are controlled by one party, and in basically by the most extreme ends of that party. And the reason it's concerning is that we have an unusual process that's really recognized nationally as an impartial process for appointing impartial judges. So this is an attempted coup, but it's an attempted coup. The other thing that's going on is there's a campaign, a nationally funded campaign, to unseat 3 judges who are up for the
Supreme Court.
They're in the Supreme Court.
Recall
Right.
of Supreme Court justices.
Yes. Would you reaffirm that you want them to remain in the seat? Usually this is something that just kind of goes by, but now there's this huge campaign because if they're unseated, the governor gets to appoint without having the usual review process. The reason that this campaign is going on, the group that's behind it, according to Florida Today, is... was it Florida? According to Florida Today, the group that's behind it is the financial services industry. And the reason they want to unseat the judges is there is a decision coming within a year on a Palm Bay ordinance passed that gives code enforcement liens priority over mortgage companies, as with tax liens. So it has to do with the foreclosure industry and trying to make sure they get their money first, the mortgage.
It's all about the dollar. Yeah. No, and Florida has some other interesting tax provisions, which I'm assuming that the League of Women Voters, Florida League of Women Voters, has spoken out against because they don't believe taxes should be in a constitutional amendment.
Are you talking about the list of 12 amendments?
Yeah, I think 6 or 8 of them, 6 or 7 of them deal with tax provisions.
It was amendments 2, 4, 9, 10, and 11 at the very least. Maybe others have implications as well.
The other ones that really got my attention were relate to public funding of abortion. It's being sold here. It's LRCA 6, Amendment 6. And it's been styled in the press and on ads as no public funding for abortions. But it goes further than that. It says that no public funds may be expended for any health benefits coverage that includes coverage of abortion. So it's like the Blunt Amendment in that it is going to have an impact on private insurance relationships and not require them to provide abortion services and private insurance contracts that people enter into in the state of Florida. But like I said, they've truncated it for mass appeal to say that no public funds may be used to support abortion. They don't tell you the second half of what's involved here.
Another one has to do with religious freedom, and it's specifically targeted toward the voucher system. Another thing that's worth noting here is I've now attended several public forums held by conservative legislatures, and the overwhelming tone of it is that the voucher system is a failure. They recognize it as a failure. It needs to be readjusted, but just the same, they're proposing amendments. In this case, it's number 8, religious freedom. The amendment would repeal a 126-year-old provision in the state constitution that prohibits taxpayer funding of religious institutions. If the amendment's passed, it would allow the state to use taxpayer monies to fund religious institutions and schools.
Is it the Religious Freedom Amendment or the Religious Funding Amendment? I mean, that's you know.
Yes, funding.
I'm happy to have you practice your own religion, people. Just don't ask me to fund it.
Right.
And I believe that's also unconstitutional, according to Florida's Constitution.
And the First Amendment of the federal Constitution.
I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. We're going to take a short break, I guess, and go. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the outliers, a few of these random little amendments that for fun that are kind of on. One of them has to do with cement. So.
And just reiterating again, go to the League of Women Voters site. And take a look. They recommend against all 12 amendments, and additionally, they recommend that you support judges remaining in their seat. This Florida State Supreme Court judges remaining in their seat. There's 3 judges that are up for review, and that, if you want more information on that, it's thevotesInYourCourt.org.
And we'll put that on our webpage.
Shots are coming fast and heavy now here in Detroit, as the night is again broken by gunfire.
Bass, how low can you go? Death row, what a brother, no. Once again back, it's the incredible rhyme animal, the young cannibal D, public enemy number 1. 5 volts said freeze, and then I got numb. Can I tell them that I really never had a gun? But it's the wax that the Terminator X spun. Now they got me in a cell, cause my records they sell. Cause a sister like me said, wow, Malcolm is the prophet that I think you wanna listen to. What he can say to you, what you ought to do is follow for now. Power, the people say, make a miracle. Pump the lyrical, black is back, all in. We gonna win, check it out. Here we go again. Bring the noise. Bring the noise. Revolution. Bring the noise. Revolution. Bring the noise. Revolution. 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 Bass, how low can you go? Death row, what a brother, no. Once again back is the incredible rhyme animal, the young cannibal D, public enemy number 1. 5 volts said freeze, and then I give it some. Can I tell them that I really never had a gun? But it's the wax that the Terminator X spun. Now they got me in a cell, cause my records they sell. Cause a sister like me said, well, Malcolm is a prophet that I think.
We're back. That was Revolution by Linda X. And we played that because of some interesting California ballot initiatives that are, or propositions is what they call them, we'll talk about. But we do have a phone call, so we wanted to. Hello, this is AirOccupy. You're on the air.
Oh, yes. Hi, this is Phil in Port Orange. First of all, I want to thank you for the program.
Welcome, man.
On the ballot initiatives and referendums, I don't know if you covered this, but they're so confusing when you step in the voting booth.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, unless you really do your homework, and, you guys did mention League of Women Voters as one place to go, but is there anything that we can do to have those things made easier for folks to understand when they go into the booth? And as far as the drug war, I want to recommend a great documentary. It's called American Drug War by Kevin Booth, American Drug War, The Great Last Hope. And it has been very successful for the people making money on it, which includes the prison industrial complex.
Yes.
Yeah.
Send that link to me, and I'll put it up on our website.
Will do. And thanks a lot for a great show, guys. Keep it up.
Thanks,
Thank
Phil.
you.
Thanks, man. There are a number of places you can go for a review. That's been one of the big criticisms here in Florida of some of these ballot measures, that they pages long, that to expect people to read this language in the voting booth, you got to go prepared. I know that votesmart.org has a review. Just go online and look up recommendations concerning the Florida initiatives and find a site you trust and read through the amendments before you go there, and go prepared if you have to take a list with you.
One of the things that Phil mentioned that I didn't get to in my remarks is the deliberately confusing language is particularly coming from the legislative initiatives. And what's interesting is that a citizens initiative has to go through this screening process. It has to be approved. The wording has to be clear and approved by the courts, but the legislatively proposed initiatives are not, and have been taken off the ballot repeatedly because they deliberately obscure the intention, and that's by both conservative and liberal judges, by the way.
Right. And, as I said in the remarks that I sent out on Facebook, a lot of the Florida initiatives make you think that if you vote no, you hate veterans or widows or veterans' widows.
That's true.
So you really have to be careful. Phil's right.
Well, Florida has a history of using faulty ballot language when providing amendments to our Constitution to our voters. And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of the state courts that have reviewed attempts to get misleading and confusing language on the ballot. Last year, the state put 4 amendments on the ballot, and 3 of those were rejected by judicial review because they were misleading and confusing. So you got to do your homework on this one.
Yep. And we're running out of time, but I do want to tell our listeners about a few things that we didn't get to talk about, things to look out for, things that are directly related to Occupy issues. And the first thing is Maryland. There is a DREAM Act referendum, so Maryland voters have a chance to vote on whether to approve the legislature-approved law that says that illegal immigrants can pay in-state tuition at state universities if they attended high school and their parents paid taxes. So that's one to look out for. There are also 2, and I can't believe we didn't get to this, but we didn't. There are 2 Citizens United measures directly related to corporate funding of elections. One of them, which is in Montana, which has a long history of not wanting corporations meddling in their political process, goes a little bit further, and it actually says that corporations are not people, only people are people. The one in Colorado moved to amend, Steve Justino, who we had as a guest on our show. The amendment in Colorado doesn't go as far. It just says that corporations can't give money in political campaigns. So those are 2 to look out for, the Citizens United related ones and the DREAM Act. And there's a smattering of union related initiatives and measures. So
Anti-union, I might add.
Yeah, anti-union. There's one in California. And then the 2 in California that I thought were pretty funny was, well, not funny, but interesting, was Proposition 34 abolishes the death penalty. And Proposition 36 kills three strikes law. So those are 2 to also look out for. That's why we played the song about the revolution. Finally, next week, as we said, just to update you guys, we're going to have Sue Wilson on, who is the producer of the movie Broadcast Blues. If you're local, please come watch that with us on Friday night at the UU in Ormond Beach at 7 p.m. And the last thing I wanted to point out was there's a campaign called Talk Poverty. And if you go on Twitter, it's #TalkPoverty. And it's a campaign to get poverty into the presidential debate. So at least one question asked about poverty. So we'll be talking about this in the future. The first debate is October 3rd. If you believe that poverty should be on the ballot, please check it out. #TalkPoverty. And we'll be tweeting some statistics about poverty because they're frankly frightening.
And foreclosure town halls?
We'll get to that next week.
Okay.
We are out of time.
See you next week. Peace.